Hi, this is Derek with the Class 4 Podcast.
And this is Cate.
All right. Today we're going to talk about some really cool stuff. First, we'll cover some of the upcoming events that are going on with the pilgrimage in the next month. And then we'll get into some of my instances with being around vehicles on fire, be it Land Rovers or aircraft.
Houses.
Or houses. So there's some interesting stories there. And then we're going to go over Cate's 83 110 build and our adventure in
Edinburgh.
Buying it in the UK, driving it around Scotland for 2 weeks, numerous breakdowns. Little breakdowns.
Well, yeah, we'll get to that.
We'll get to that. And her recovering me here in Vermont numerous times with the 110 and some of our adventures up at Maine and Winter Run. So really hope you guys enjoy. So what do we have going on first for our first, we got our first meet and greet coming up.
We do. That's going to be at the Worthy Burger in South Royalton on May the 20th from noon until 2 p.m. So come down, come out and say hello to everybody. And the Hendersons at the Hideaway will also have camping available if anyone needs to stay the night. So you can reach out to them.
Jason has some amazing food, and his beer selection is incredibly on point with anything you'd want from local Vermont breweries. Worthy Burger is one of my favorites, and Jason has been helping support the event since really I started it in 2020. And Worthy Kitchen is also in South Woodstock, but Worthy Kitchen needs reservations, Worthy Burger you don't. So we're really looking forward to that. The next one we have coming up is Memorial Day weekend on the 29th. We have our Cemeteries and Cellar Holes tour, and that's going to start out with some really cool stories about the deadly vines in Dummerston Cemetery, work our way up through Cavendish and a couple other towns, up to the Indian Stones and some great cemeteries and cellar holes along the way. We still have a couple slots open for that. So again, that's going to be May 29th. That's going to be greens and I've got to pre-run everything again this week, but it's mainly going to be a greens with some slight blue sections. And if it changes anything more, then we'll change the route. But really looking forward to that. That's the first of our history tours. Again, my big focus is the history stuff. I like getting out, seeing this stuff, and that's what the Class 4 roads are kind of helping me accomplish. So,
And where's that going to start?
That's going to start down Dummerston, and that will end either in Plymouth or Reading, depending how far we get. Again, it's not about rushing anybody. We can take as much or as long as we need, but the goal is to get really from Dummerston up to the Indian Stones and tell that story of in Reading, which is the awesome story of a family who was abducted by Indians and brought through Reading, and the lady gave birth to her daughter in Reading along the brook, and then was up in Quebec for a number of years, and then they released her husband, and I believe he was able to raise enough money to buy his family back, and then she commissioned this, really the first monument that's in U.S. history, commemorating a historical event in Reading. It's been moved slightly because before it was in risk getting a flood dam, but it commemorates and tells the story of her giving birth to her daughter while being prisoner of the Indians. Kidnapped by Indians. So that's
terrifying.
Terrifying. Well, speaking of terrifying stuff, let's get into my numerous experiences with fire and how that has changed what I carry in my vehicle. So to lay them all out, last year I had the LR4 catch fire while I was driving it.
Isn't that this year?
No, it was last year.
You sure?
Yeah, because it happened in December.
Oh, okay, towards the end of
so
the
last year, I've also been in 2 aircraft that have been on fire, luckily on the ground. But those are some interesting stories that definitely makes you think about some decision-making stuff. Been around a couple aircraft that are on fire, but I wasn't in them. House fire when I was a kid, that's not the great house. My room got struck by lightning. And as it does. But really we'll get into the LR4 one first. So I was on a really long road trip. And the LR4, a lot of you knew, was my modern off-roading and overlanding rig. It was a great car. It was 2012 with like 180,000 miles on it, and we used it pretty hard. It was a great family vehicle, an incredibly comfortable drive. So I took it to an event all the way down in Georgia, and on the way home, I was driving back, and all of a sudden, also out by Albany, all of a sudden, all the check-in, like every light on the dash that can come on, comes on. And I'm like, ah, shit, I blew a serpentine belt thinking it's something that simple. Pull over to the side of the road. It's right on Route 7. There's not a lot of space to pull over. It's like pretty much no shoulder.
But there was still snow on the ground, I remember.
Oh, yeah, there's also still a lot of snow and ice. So anyways, we pull over, and I pop the hood thinking I'll go look, and that's when I start noticing wisps of smoke coming out from under the hood.
Not good.
Not good. Not good. And this is where I made my first mistake. Was I didn't grab the fire extinguisher immediately then. I went to investigate the problem. So I was with another friend. We both got out of the car, and because there was no shoulder, we both shut our doors so we could step back and then go forward. So we didn't want to get hit by a car.
Hit by a truck, yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
trucks. Like there's vehicles doing like 55, 60 by us, and there's like no shoulder. Go forward. I popped the hood, and there's a lot of flames. And what had happened...
You said 20-foot high flame.
Not 20 foot, but it was over the hood. It was well over the hood, the open hood of an LR4, which is impressive. It's a lot of flames. The reason why it was a lot of flames is my fuel rail went spraying gas at 50 or 60 psi all over my hot engine that I've been driving for 10 hours. So immediately what we do is we go to get the fire extinguisher.
But
when we go to open the doors, the LR4 has locked itself with all the doors shut,
all
windows
the
up.
Electrical squirrely that's going on.
Yeah, and there's all this horn stuff going on. That's not really good when you really want to try to put the fire out. So I was like, that sucks. And then I'm looking at, in between my center console, I always keep a glass breaker. It's something I highly recommend for anyone to have in their rigs, whether it's an off-roading rig or not. I always keep a glass breaker in the center console so I know where it is, and also that's latched. So during an accident, that's probably not going to fly open, and that's probably not going to get a huge amount of damage.
You need it somewhere where you can reach it.
Where you know where it is every time. So that doesn't.
But also they're also seatbelt cutters too.
They're also seatbelt cutter, which is
because a guy died on 89 a couple of months back because they couldn't get the seatbelt.
Yeah. So I'm staring at where my glass breaker is. That's bad. Then I'm staring at where my fire extinguisher is mounted in between the rear seats. That's also bad. And I'm like, well, this kind of sucks. And then I look over and I see all my really expensive night vision equipment, which is sitting there in the seats and on a vehicle that's now engulfed in flames. And I know insurance definitely will not cover that.
They will not cover that. Well, they wouldn't even cover.
They wouldn't even cover the off-roading
equipment that was on it.
So that's what I made a snap decision. I've got to get in there. So another tip of advice is if you ever have to break into your vehicle, the second row windows and the windows on the very back are a lot less strong than the driver's area windows or the windshield.
Or the front passenger.
Or the front passenger.
Go a row back to break the glass. So
I was proceeding to get the trailer hitch off and try to smash that through a window when my friend Riker pulled out his Harbor Freight pocket knife that had a glass breaker on it and said, would this work? It definitely worked. So I've managed to break the glass open on the vehicle. The entire engine bay is now engulfed in flames. Flames are going above. Traffic stopped on both sides. People are watching as I'm trying to get into the vehicle thinking...
Oh, guy turned up with a massive fire extinguisher.
Yeah, that happens in a minute. So people think I'm trying to rescue a dog or like children. But no, I'm going after my high-end night vision equipment. And I dive in, get the door open, and start chucking Pelican cases into the middle of Route 7. And Riker's trying to catch them like in a cartoon. Because I'm like chucking them as far away from the fire as I can get. So I get all of them out, and I have a normal-sized, automotive fire extinguisher. Nothing great. And I start walking towards the front. There's no way this has a hope in. But luckily, as I like to tell people, I have the best, worst luck. So when
Right.
something goes bad, generally everything else goes right. A guy in a semi coming the other way had a fire extinguisher that looked like it should have been on wheels. It was huge. And he came over, and with our 2 fire extinguishers, we managed to get the engine fire out by depleting his massive fire extinguisher for a semi truck and my little fire extinguisher.
Yeah, thankfully he stopped. So thank you to
Thankfully,
that
he
guy out
stopped.
there, whoever you
So,
are.
some of the takeaways from that is the car's a total write off. Insurance had to deal with it. If you've ever dealt with a vehicle that's had a fire with insurance, it takes forever. But the couple takes away are I did some things wrong and I did some things right. I should have left the doors open because I never thought that the fire would be bad enough it would destroy the electrical system, thus locking all the doors. I should have taken the fire extinguisher with me, and now I make sure that all my daily carry pocket knives have a glass breaker on them. If not for that scenario, suppose I can't get to my glass breaker right away or something and I need to help somebody, it's literally just a tiny stud that you don't notice, and it can make the world of a difference when seconds matter. But that was my first vehicle fire. I've had minor vehicle fires with Land Rovers, like older Land Rovers with ignition systems and all that, but like nothing
But nothing
crazy.
where
Nothing like
it's let loose.
nothing where the car has
And it's an
decided
inferno.
was an inferno. We did keep the fire just in the engine bay, but that all was totaled. So I can't stress enough having a fire extinguisher in your vehicle and having a glass breaker. Ideally, one that you can carry with your everyday carrying pocket knife, but definitely one in your vehicle for if you needed to get out, all that stuff. And I always kept the fire extinguisher in the car in case I had a dash fire or anything like that, because this is where it comes back to my aviation side is coming from aviation, fire is incredibly terrifying to me. Luckily, both my fires in the airplane have been on the ground where I could egress the aircraft. Whereas if it happens in the sky, you're kind of fucked until you can land the airplane.
Oh, you've got to land as soon as you can. I mean,
Or
that's it. Declare and
depending,
land.
it's not always going to be something you can put out with a fire bottle if your aircraft is even equipped with that. Um, so 2 years ago, we were flying in my father's airplane with
God, was it
me.
that long ago now?
Yeah, it's maybe
That's unbelievable.
almost 2.5 years ago.
That's right, because you, your dad, and our oldest son, Hugh, who's now 12, so he was 10 at the time,
Hmm.
you and your dad were getting current again, so they took off from our local airport and went up to Burlington, Vermont. And Derek did his check ride, and then came back, and then your dad went up and did his check ride and came back.
Yep.
So they were all in the plane. Hugh's right at the back, and if you know a Cherokee 6, it's you've got the door over the wing, and then you've got a door on the opposite side in the rear, and that's where Hugh was. He was right at the back of the plane.
No, he was riding in the.
Oh, I thought he was in the
No,
back.
no. My dad was in the back.
Oh, your dad was in the back.
Hugh was in the co-pilot seat with me, and we were just getting ready after all these flights to
Go home.
go home. And I pull onto the runway, and you should always listen to the people around you. So Hugh says, "I smell smoke," and I can see smoke, and it was just wisps coming out from under the dash. And the first thing I thought was just, immediately I canceled the takeoff because we were just pulling on. I was getting ready to bring the power up, and the first thing I thought is I've left the parking brake on. It's something that happens in a lot of these little airplanes, and that will definitely cause you to get some smoke and see some of the cockpit from the vents. And parking brake was off, so I'm like, that's weird. Didn't see any electrical fire. Didn't smell electrical, which is generally, if you're gonna have a fire in the airplane, it's generally electrical. So we decided that, hey, let's abort the takeoff and we'll taxi back to Magnets. It's a really long taxi at Burlington because we're at the far end. And I told the tower, hey, we saw some smoke, maybe a little bit in the cockpit. It seemed to have dissipated. We're going to taxi back to Magnets. And what that allowed us to do was know that they would keep an extra eye on us. So the air traffic controller, who was an ex-Air Force guy like I was, decided that he was going to take it upon himself to watch us the whole way back with his binoculars while we were taxiing back. And he had us taxi close in front of his tower so he could easier to keep an eye on us.
Yeah.
And just when we got in front of the main terminal with all the airliners in Burlington, I heard him say, 26L Charlie, you're on fire. There's a lot of smoke. And when you hear that, stuff starts going really fast, but also really, really slow. Like time slowed down, but you're doing a lot of things fast. So I immediately killed the fuel to the engine, brought the airplane to a stop, and he's talking on the radio. And at that point, like any conversation with him is out the window. I'm focusing on other things. And I told my dad and my son to get out of the airplane. And I could see, and he said when he saw the fire it was on the right side. So I told my son and my dad to get out of the airplane. He was, what, 9, 10 at the time. So it's very easy for him to jump over 2 rows of seats and go out the back.
Not
My
so
dad's
much your
already
dad.
me at 270 pounds going over 3 rows of seats, not really going to do it in a timely manner. So I decided to go out over the wing that was
On fire.
on fire. Well, the wing wasn't on fire yet. The whole wheel was on fire. So just as I'm getting out of the airplane, I can hear the tire pop. And I used to be an F-16 crew chief, so I've heard a bunch of tire pops. And that always tells you the fire is really, really hot, because it takes a lot to burst a tire with heat. And also, hydraulic fluid burns like a blowtorch.
Yeah.
And
really flammable.
I may not be able to jump well when I'm not motivated, but when you're properly motivated, like there's a blowtorch of hydraulic fluid spewing out of where you're trying to jump. White men can jump.
He turned into a mountain
And
gazelle.
I turned into a mountain gazelle, and I jumped farther than I've ever jumped in my life off of a wing that was also holding, the wing's holding like 40 something gallons of fuel.
It's not good.
You know, and the fire is literally right underneath the fuel tank. So
yeah, you could see on the photos afterwards. You could see where
I'll post one of the photos of the fire when we release the podcast. So, anyways, the big thing was we got away from the airplane, which is now on fire. We linked up, so that's an important thing with whether it's in a vehicle or not. Always have accountability of whoever is with you. That is the most important thing beyond anything. Is screw the vehicle. Screw anything else. You got to have accountability with the people that are around you, or the same thing would be your furry friends. I would consider my dog no different than my family. I have to have accountability to him. I have to know before I deal with anything. I got to know that everyone else is out of the danger area. Luckily for me, again, I always say this: I have the best worst luck.
Yeah, because the fire truck guys were suited up already because they were
in the middle of an exercise for an aircraft on fire. And these are guys that I used to know from when I'm at the Air Guard. So they get the crash call. They're already fully suited in next to their trucks, and they drive out, and they manage to save the airplane. It needed a new wing, which took about a year and a half. But
yeah, because of COVID, it just
had it not been that, had they not been there, that would have been 84 gallons of fuel
burning
that could explode. There's an explosion risk with that.
Exactly.
So we managed to get that all sorted. But the lessons I took away from that is you have to have a plan on what you're going to do. So I'd always had a plan.
Remember at flight, well, you could fly when you went to flight school. I couldn't fly when I went to flight safety. But I always remember with Gray, and you do your run up and you're down there, and then you do the brief. It's like, if I have an engine failure below 1,000 feet, I'm landing straight ahead. If I have an engine failure at this is what I'm going to do. And I remember in Vero, a plane literally having an engine failure. It took off for me, and I'm like, oh, that's a nice plane. I wish I was in that and not my little Warrior. And then they have an emergency, and they end up landing on the main road. I mean, it can happen at any time. You have to have a brief, and you have to have
you have to have a plan for
what you're going to do.
And that's whether it's the vehicle fire, or it could be a major breakdown, or it could be something as important like what happens if this recovery goes wrong? What happens if the vehicle winds up the side? Like, you've got to think about that stuff and have a plan, so you're not just making it up as you go along.
Don't just do it. Think about it.
And it was amazing that the reason I was able to do what I did with the accident was because training kicked in, and that's where it saved me. If the fire department had been there and I've been trying to work my way out the back, being a fat kid, it probably wouldn't have gone as well. But you got to think about these things. The other time I was in an airplane was on fire was at the airlines. I was in a Dash 8 that caught fire at the gate, which luckily all my fires went on the ground. So we're
How did
sitting
that
there.
catch fire?
The igniters went, and we had really bad magnets.
That's reassuring.
Yeah. So we're sitting at the gate. None of the engines are running. This is a story about how weird stuff can happen, and you really got to think outside the box as to why it could be happening. So we're sitting at the gate, and I'm getting my clearance to go to wherever we're going to go. And in Newark, all the people are above you on like the second floor. Man, there's a lot of people watching us from the glass. I'm like, whatever. Didn't think twice about it. The captain's doing his paperwork. I'm in the co-pilot seat, first officer seat, getting my clearance on the radio, and the flight attendant's in the back doing her stuff. And all of a sudden, I see the gate agent run out the door, and she's like waving frantically and pointing at the right engine. I'm like, that's really weird. And then I start turning my head because it's dark, and it starts getting brighter and brighter. And I'm like, oh, that's not a good sign. And I look over, and the right engine's on fire. So first thing that you scream is what you've been taught is engine fire, the right engine's on fire. And the captain and I simultaneously go to pull the T-handle, which on a turboprop kills fuel and also puts the extinguishers
the extinguisher on it,
into the engine. Problem is that only works if you're running. None of the engines are on right now, and the engine is on fire. That makes you think, how is this engine on fire?
Yeah.
At the exact same moment, our flight attendant calmly comes forward and says, hey, you know the right engine's on fire. As nonchalantly as she can. 20-year-old girl, really nice in the Midwest, that doesn't realize that the freaking airplane's on fire and it's not normal. So I tell her, get the fuck out of the airplane, we're on fire. And the first thing we can think of is we'll turn the power off, the main power off. And luckily that put the fire out. So what it caused it is, here's the other fun fact. That airplane had caught fire once before during the day, but they only wrote it up in the maintenance manual as replace starter, not airplane caught fire. So I would have questioned more in the paperwork had it said airplane caught fire. Anyways, what had happened is the igniters below the starter were getting power as soon as the main power was getting switched on. So they were just sitting there burning and catching the start.
So as soon as you flick the master...
Yeah, they're igniting, but there's no fuel or anything.
There's no fuel running.
They're not designed to run for like 15 minutes at a time.
What a terrible design.
No, that's how it works. Just they're not meant to run. Yeah, they're not meant to run for a number of minutes at a time without anything to burn. Because they switch off when the airplane starts.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So lessons learned from that is always expect the unexpected. But that's really it for my fire stories. So let's get into our 1983 110. Isla. So back in 2018, as all you know, I've loved Land Rovers for a very long time, and the first Land Rover I ever bought was...
Wasn't it one that I bought you?
No, it was the lightweight that we bought.
Oh, yeah.
So we went out for a test drive to see this old Land Rover lightweight in Vermont, and I couldn't even drive because I drove stick so badly. And
I taught you to drive stick.
You did. And you were driving, but Catherine, if you haven't noticed from her accent, Catherine's from the UK. On dirt roads, Catherine tends to drive on the wrong side of the road, especially when she's in a right-hand drive
car, yeah.
So I'm laughing hysterically because I'm having so much fun. She's laughing hysterically. She's driving on the wrong side of the road. It was all sorts of crazy. We ended up buying a lightweight, and that started a addiction to...
Your addiction?
Yeah, but now it's part of yours.
Yes, but I've always had Land Rovers because I'm British.
Well, yeah, I grew up with, like, Jeep Wagoneers, which are cool, but not the same. So anyways, in 2018, we decided we would like to do a driving trip to do 2 days driving around Scotland. And I was like, I'm going to set this up. It's going to be
driving around
2 weeks. Yeah, 2 weeks driving around Scotland.
How far to go for 2 days?
Couldn't even do it. Yeah. So 2 weeks driving around Scotland, and we were like, what are we going to do it in? And I could have rented a Land Rover, and I used to have a company importing old Land Rovers. I said, you know what? We should buy one and then use it and then bring it home. And we knew we needed a 110 because we had 3 kids. and we started the hunt. And we
Right.
knew we were going to get a 3-door Land Rover because we couldn't afford a 5-door. Those days of cheap 5 doors had long gone. So we looked for a 3-door, and we also wanted a hardtop because I don't want to say that thievery is very common in the UK, but it's really common in the UK. A soft top
Yeah, someone's
parked
just
in the
going to cut
city,
through there.
someone's going to nick your luggage.
Well, I even had to have that thing that went over the pedals, remember?
Oh yeah, Land Rover Defender is the most stolen car in the UK. So we would lock our pedals with a pedal lock, the gas pedals and everything, so that way no one could steal it.
Crazy.
So we found this really nice, mechanically wise and chassis and bulkhead wise RAF 110, but it was really rough cosmetic shape.
It was
Like
yellow, wasn't it? Bright yellow.
yeah, so it was an ex Royal Air Force um, vehicle, so it really never saw any hard life, which was nice. And a friend of ours, who some of you met at the pilgrimage, Andy Stevens, he's a good friend of mine. Hopefully, we'll see him again. If you guys met him last year, he was my friend who came over who has ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. And hopefully, we'll see him again at this year's pilgrimage. He rebuilt it for us and got it all set up so we could do 2 weeks driving around Scotland in a 1983 diesel Land Rover, which does about 60 miles an hour, is not overly quiet, and do it with, how old were the boys?
Um, what year did we go?
2019,
2019. So they were like 7 and 5, maybe.
something like that.
Electra was only
Electro's
like
baby.
2.
So,
Yeah, she
anyways,
was
they got
way
it
too
set up.
young
They
for a
did
driving
rear.
thing.
We had forward-facing jump seats in the back because that's a huge thing that I'm a fan of. I love these old rigs with the sideways-facing jump seats for just like little trail use and going around the property. They're not safe for long-distance trips
Well,
with
they also
kids.
had the seats were great, and they had the integral seat belt.
Yep.
And then we had all the USB couple of ports put in, one in front of each kid, because I didn't want to deal with fights over who's charging what.
Oh my God, who's watching the Nook and who's no,
Yeah,
that was
maddening. Yeah, and then had some, had a resprayed this really nice
RAF blue.
RAF blue
We had
color.
power steering to put in so you could drive it properly
Yeah,
after
because of my arm.
your arm after the accident, and then just other little things like radio and tough box, and we put in a bunch of storage solutions, new locks because we were had
Eventually, we put in new windows too, but we didn't have those for that trip, unfortunately. That
no
was when it was
yeah
back
we had the older
stateside.
yeah we had
Mm-hmm.
windows that didn't
They didn't
open, but at
open.
least we had windows for the kids to look out. So other fun fact about this trip is we left in July, was it August?
August.
We left first week of August in 2019, and I have to say I have some amazing friends because not only did I get one of my friends, Thomas, to watch the house, but he was watching all our dogs. And normally at the time we had a pack of what, 6 dogs, 7 dogs of Irish
Oh,
Wolfhounds. But Ava just had puppies,
oh
so
my God.
I left my friend
She
to
had
watch.
10
I
puppies.
left my friend to watch my house with 17 dogs. So
Poor
seven,
Tom.
seven full size. Well, what was it? 6 full size Irish Wolfhounds, a Labradoodle, and then 10 Irish Wolfhound puppies.
Puppies. Mm-hmm.
That's how amazing my friends are. And he did it without complaint. And Thomas has Caramello, a
He does.
beautiful
He has
Irish
one of the
Wolfhound,
puppies, in fact.
and he has a beautiful Land Rover lightweight. You'll probably meet him at the pilgrimage. One of the nicest guys you can ever meet, and also an amazing chef. If you ever
The
are up in the
food's awesome.
Middlebury area, the Middlebury Marquee Theater is the
Yeah, the movie
ultimate date
theatre.
night. You can get movies, drinks, and amazing tacos.
And everybody knows how fussy I am about food. And Thomas's
Yes,
food is
Catherine is beyond
excellent.
fussy with food. So, anyways, we go on this trip and we show up, and the car's just been all done, and we picked up the car
Well, we
in.
are 24 hours late because American Airlines screwed us, remember?
Oh yeah, we had to spend the night in Philly because the flight got canceled. So we're now a day behind in all our planning. So like the hotels are kind of messed up for the first part of the trip. So we show up and we go and see the car for the first time and pick it up at Andy's place. And Andy runs airsoft sites like I used to, and so they make really good storage areas. So the first time Cate saw her 110 is when we walked through the gates of
The prison.
HMS or Her Majesty's Prisons,
Yeah, HMP.
Portsmouth,
Portsmouth.
HMP Portsmouth, which
Mm-hmm.
is a Victorian debtor's prison, which is straight out of Shawshank. but way more terrifying. Said it's proper old prison, and that's where we picked up the 110.
Mm-hmm.
And we drove off, and we did all sorts of stuff to it. But the one thing we did not do to it
Let's check
is,
the fuel tank.
yes, we didn't fully fill the fuel tank. So we put diesel in it, and it starts leaking like a sieve because,
Everywhere. Down the road. I'm so embarrassed.
yeah, the float level gauge,
Wasn't it
the
a
float
hole
level
in the
receiver,
neck?
no, it's the float level receiver. Well, we
Oh.
found that later. Float level receiver, the gasket was gone, so anytime you're more than half tank, it would leak
Which is
horrendously.
not ideal on a driving holiday.
So we take an extra day, we're now 2 days late for the trip, and get that replaced. And then we find out that if we're really full, it leaks out of the filler neck. So we just would fill the car to what we thought was 90% full. And we started our drive, and I don't know if you're experienced with the UK, we drove from literally the bottom of the UK, Portsmouth, all the way up to Edinburgh in a
In a
day.
day. Yeah.
In a 1983 Land Rover that does 60 something miles an hour
60, 65 max. I mean,
on the
up a hill, forget
motorways,
about it.
whatever that, up one of the M's. And that was an experience, but everyone was doing good all the way up until
We went through the borders, and we were heading up towards Edinburgh.
it's about 9
And it's
p.m.
dark, and the weather is horrendous. There is the
Thunderstorms,
massive
rain,
torrential rain. The rain was bouncing off the road,
headlights are on, wipers
and
are
it was
on,
wipers are going like the clappers.
and the alternator light comes on.
Yeah.
So I pull over and I proceed to tighten what I think is just a loose alternator. And we set off again, and 5 minutes later, the alternator light comes on.
Yep.
And I'm on the side of the road, and I can't tighten up the alternator anymore.
It is.
And
We had this. Luckily, they had this with pull off, so we were
Yeah,
safe. We
we had
weren't
a
going to get
pull-off.
biffed by a truck. We were off the side of the road, and the boys were delighted because we were near a railway. Remember? There's
Yeah,
a train
they
track
were
there.
watching the trains and the thunderstorm. And you had a bottle of wine, so you were good.
Thank God I stopped at that Tesco on the M whatever, M1, M6, whatever it was.
Yep.
And we'd stacked up on snacks like sandwiches. I got a screw top bottle of wine, and I
We
had
were
kids
provisioned.
games. Yeah, we had
We were
loads
provisioned.
of provisions and stuff for the kids to do, and
So-
headlamps as well.
So it turns out what had broken, and I had all my tools. I flew over to the UK with 40 pounds of tools to
Yeah.
work on trucks. I'm like, if anything breaks, I'm going to be able to fix it in Scotland. I had spares. I had everything. What I did
Yeah,
not
but
have
we're thinking
was
it's
a crankshaft pulley because it
Right.
never breaks. And that's a big socket. It's like a 37 mil or something. It's huge.
it's huge.
And you're not fixing that. So, well, at least not fixing it out there when you need tools. So we call the
break
RAC and we spend 4 hours, luckily entertained, on the side of the road. And this wonderful guy in a tow truck from Edinburgh picks us up and says he's going to drop us off at our hotel, even though it's
Which
against
he wasn't
policy.
supposed
He
to
wasn't
do.
supposed to, because where we were towing the Land Rover to
Was not so I'd hired an apartment, 2-bedroom apartment, with a kitchen and all the rest of it, living room.
but we were only
in
going to get there
Edinburgh,
for a night
one
because
night
we were already
so
2
late.
days late.
Yeah,
So we missed 2 whole days of this booking, anyways.
which was all right because the bed was really uncomfortable. Remember?
Yeah, for like the 4 hours we slept on it. So, anyways, they drop off the car.
So that goes to engine
Engine 710,
which is
But
underneath the
post
bridges there.
Yeah, we posted on the Rover group, hey, this is what's going on, we need help. And I had so many offers for help and garage space.
People were amazing.
Even like the British Army up there saw I was there and offered me a space in their garages if I needed it with one of their mechanics. Like, this is just the level of, like, once you get into a vehicle community, it doesn't matter if it's Land Rovers, Toyota, Jeep, that community will support you and will help you in any way they can. And the Land Rover community came through. So we needed a crankshaft pulley for a 2.5 normally aspirated, and there was none in all of Scotland. And Engine 710 dropped everything they were doing to check over the 110 that morning and see if they could fix it themselves. And they said, hey, this is what's wrong. We need this part. It's not in Scotland. So Andy's like, all right, there's a part 2 hours away. I'll drive up and get it.
Yeah.
And I'll send my friend Luke, who's
he
a mechanic.
flew to Edinburgh from Southampton or wherever.
Got off the airplane.
Went straight to the car.
And Engine 710 let them use their tools. They didn't have a bay open because they were in the middle of a bunch of restorations. The They let him use tools, and he got it going, and then jumped in an airplane back the
And for
same
like, can we
day.
take you out for dinner and get you a hotel and stuff? And he's like, no, I've got to get back. But he fixed the car because the whole point was driving around in the car that we would call Isla because we were up in the Hebrides,
Yep.
and I didn't want to hire a rental car to drive
Yeah, it's not as much fun
around
driving around Scotland in a Prius. So, anyways, we get it fixed, and we spent 2 nights in Edinburgh. Just
Mm-hmm.
because we've been traveling, it had been hard. We decided to take 2 nights off and skip doing the eastern side of Scotland just to like relax. And we spent 2 nights at the amazing
Well, I
Grand
was born there
Hotel.
anyway, so I I know that area.
We stayed at the Edinburgh Grand, which was amazing. And
Oh my God, that suite you got us was just the best thing. It was such a beautiful hotel. Remember that meal we had, those steaks? Oh, it was the best thing
it's the
I've
only
ever
place in
eaten.
Scotland where I had where they actually had properly cooked steaks. Anyways, we continued on, and we discovered one thing: the belt for the power steering was broken. And I don't know if anyone's ever tried to drive a
Oh
Land
my
Rover that
God,
has power steering when the power steering isn't working. It sucks.
so heavy.
And I proceeded to drive that 110 through the Highlands, which are there is no straight part of the road. It is constant
Tons.
turns. My arms were jello at the end, but luckily we managed to track down a power steering belt in Fort Williams, which we were
Fort
heading
William.
Fort William. We were heading towards anyways, and I
Because we were
managed.
going up towards Dorney where I'd hired
Mm-hmm.
a house. So, because I wanted to be able to, cook for us and, because the kids, buy water. As soon as, because Dorney is like where three lochs come together, and there's a nice castle there and a nice little village. But within 5 minutes, the kids
It's
are
like the most
soaking wet.
photographed castle in Scotland.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I mean,
Um,
it's a
and you're
reproduction.
only like 40 minutes from Skye. You're also only like an hour or something from Loch Ness. If anyone ever wants to go do a driving trip around Scotland, we'd be more than happy to point you in the right direction. So we got this replaced, make it to the castle, and manage to relax. And
Yeah,
then
but on the way
oh,
again, it was raining because it's Scotland,
Scotland,
and we're on the E02 up there, and it's pissing down
which
with
is like
rain.
sheer mountain
Yeah,
cliff on one side, and
it's a
then sheer
single,
drop off.
one lane each direction, and suddenly we're just driving along, and the windscreen wiper falls off.
Just flew off straight into the lock, and I'm like, well, that sucks.
Well, luckily it was my side and not the
Luckily, it's the
driver's
passenger side.
side. Again,
Um,
the
yeah, the
best
luck.
worst luck.
And I'm like, we're not like the
That was
closest
hilarious.
auto repair stop is like 3 hours in the other direction. We're not going. So we did most of the trip with only one windscreen wiper. Um, the next crazy thing we did is we did Applecross,
Oh my God.
and Applecross is the most terrifying
It's
road you can
stunning,
drive. It's
stunningly
stunningly
beautiful.
beautiful, but if you screw it up, you're gonna die.
It's a single track road with little bumps
And
in it where you pull over,
when we mean single track, I mean like it's
you
narrower
can't
than
pass.
most people's driveways. There's not two cars. Two cars can't get by.
No,
Like,
there's not enough room. And then there's like a 2,000-foot drop on the one
and then you
side.
go straight into the lock.
No, it's a valley.
Yeah, but you on the
Well, you'd
ocean
roll
side,
down.
yeah,
Yeah.
you'd roll down. There's no stopping it. So we're going up it, and I'm
That
okay.
guy with the
Yeah, we watched a
the
guy
bike
biking up of it, and he had his kid in one of those little stroller things that go behind it. And you're like, man, I'm not sure
attached
I'd
by a
trust that. Like, by
bolt.
like probably like the
But there was
cheapest bolt.
no there was no backup chain.
There's like nothing.
There was
It's like
nothing.
one little bolt holding this kid in this cart from like imminent death. I'm like, God, my wife would kill me. Uh,
Oh my God, it was just
so we did
ridiculous.
this amazing turn, and it's just
And we'll post some
incredible driving.
photos. I've got
Yeah.
beautiful pictures at the top with the Highland cows that are just
It-
walking along the
One
road.
thing
And
about Scotland is I went up there
it's
thinking I needed
beautiful.
all my off-road recovery equipment, everything. It really made me appreciate what we have here in Vermont because everything is paved in Scotland.
Hmm.
I didn't touch any gravel unless it was in the hotel parking lot at the castle. It was all paved, which really makes me appreciate. I thought it was going to be like Vermont, which made me appreciate the class 4 roads here because unlike a lot of places in the world, we can go and use these class 4 roads. In Europe, you're not doing that in the UK. Green lading is incredibly rare over there. And in Scotland, it's non-existent unless you are on a private property that's set up for it. So it made me thankful for what we had here in Vermont. We did Applecross, which was amazing. Drove around the eastern side of Loch Ness and visited the Fraser,
The
uh,
Clan Fraser has
Clan
a
Fraser graveyard there.
cemetery there.
And
Yeah, beautiful.
I like my Vermont history in terms of like looking at some of the graveyards, but seeing the graveyard over there where like every other grave it lists the death as like drawn and quartered, hung for sedition, shot for treason. There's some really interesting history when you get out.
That's the Jacobites.
Jaguars. So the rest of the trip was uneventful. We drove home, but we shipped this
Ships are
83
back.
110 back, and it's been all over with us. We actually use it as our daily driver.
Yeah.
You know, the
Since
only
the LR4 burst into flames.
yeah, the only modern car we have is an '08 Range Rover, which came with the house. So we've done a lot in this car, and it's changed as we've started to do a lot more trips with it.
Yeah, she's got a steering guard.
The steering guard. You also have your differential guards.
Mm-hmm.
We've added a winch.
New seats, heated seats, which are
heated seats,
awesome.
which is definitely keen. And then
and the heater.
And the Chinese diesel bunk heater. Because these cars generate like no heat in the winter, has been a great upgrade.
Yeah, the heated seats in that is just fantastic.
And then a 2-inch lift kit with the old Mini Emu springs, and a swing-away rear tire carrier, so the door is a lot easier to open for you.
It's heavy though, but it's definitely easier.
But and then we put US tires on it. We went the KM3s, which is my favorite.
Do you remember when we
when
we got it shipped back over, and there was some screw up, and it got stuck in bumfuck New York somewhere, and we get back, and some fucker nicked the radio.
Who steals like a 2006 radio that didn't even have Bluetooth? I don't know, like an old Land Rover. Well, someone did.
The radio?
It's gone. Yeah. So,
people, man.
But
ridiculous.
A lot of you have seen Catherine driving this truck when we do it, and she likes the greens. She is much more of a rally.
I like going fast.
You're a rally driver a lot more than you are
on that one up by Reading, and that's a fast road. And I remember going up that in Isla Hell for Leather, and I felt like I was in a Bond movie because I had like 5 motorbikes behind me.
Oh yeah, that
was awesome.
That class 4 is probably one of the most
fun
used for adventure bikes.
And that's where
I'd love to see more adventure bikes.
You broke down.
No, yes.
That way.
So,
yes, you did.
So I'm in my 86 ex Special Forces Land Rover 110, and this is another thing on why you should always wheel or be out in the class 4s with someone else, because breakdowns happen, stuff happens.
Yeah, don't do it.
And this was one that I couldn't fix. The ignition switch was done. I couldn't. It was getting no power. And it was another diesel, so it was getting no power to the.
I know Jerry. He was with us, and Chantal.
Jerry was with us.
He was in his Willies, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was in the Willies. Yeah. So like we couldn't bump start it. We couldn't do anything. Catherine pulled me out in the 110 all the way from Plymouth,
grumbling about it.
To Reading, which is that's a long.
It's a long ass drive.
It's like towing. That's like 45 minutes of being towed behind a vehicle back on the class 4s.
Until I looked in my mirror.
Until Catherine.
Derek wasn't there.
And again, this is where, as you learn, I didn't use a soft shackle. I used a soft shackle to her 110. We didn't have a regular tow rope.
But I had no idea where you were, because I didn't know how far back. I dropped you.
Yes, so Hugh and I are
waving and
Hugh and I are riding in the 110. And next thing you know, she just takes off, and the 30-foot kinetic rope's just trailing behind her, and Hugh and I just roll to a stop. Like, how long do you think before Mummy comes back? And it was like 25 minutes. We're sitting there.
So
like,
I look, and then
she went a really long way.
I was trying to find somewhere to turn around. I got all the kids with me.
Well, you had Electra and Harry, yeah.
And I think I had Chantal too.
And you were so intent on
driving that
you didn't realize we were there. But this is where I messed up. I used a soft shackle on hers, and the 110 had a just a drop pin in the front bumper for towing aircraft and that sort of shit, or trailers. And I used that but it didn't have a cotter piece. So when we hit a certain bump, it
It just
popped
came
out,
off. Yeah.
and then it was gone. The other thing is I didn't have a proper toe strap, which I now all carry. I just had a kinetic rope, and that really killed the kinetic rope, which was an expensive, an expensive loss of like $160, but that's what we needed to get out. But yeah, did that.
Well, and now we have all the, in addition to the fire extinguishers and the seatbelt cutters and the glass
Every vehicle set
breakers,
up with a basic recovery
recovery kit,
kit with kinetic rope, anything that's suited to that
dampeners,
winch,
soft shackle, hard
soft
shackle.
shackles, hard
Hmm.
shackle, really, anything that you need to set up for that vehicle's ability to recover itself. And even the Rovers or the UAZ and stuff that doesn't have a winch, I still
And
have a
stuff that
kinetic
breaks,
rope.
like fan belts and
Yeah, I
all
always
that
carry some
sort
basic
of stuff.
spares. We've also taken
Fuses.
this 110 up to Winter Romp to do winter wheeling, which if you haven't done any off-roading in deep snow or ice, I will tell you that is an
Oh my god.
experience. So we went up a couple years in that, and we used to always chain up. We always had studded V-bar chains, and really the 110 would go just about anywhere we needed to. Very rarely did we
Because
have
I
to
didn't
winch.
go this year because I had surgery in October and I didn't want to get bounced
So
around.
I went this year with her 110 instead, and I decided I was going to be lazy and not put chains on the 110. I was just going to run super air down at 12 psi. Problem is,
Oops.
her 110 is on older series wheels meant for tubeless tires or for tubed tires, not meant to be at 12 psi getting jostled around
So the
in
tires.
ditches. So I managed to spin off 3 tires within probably about 300 yards, maybe 200 yards. And thankfully, Brady didn't murder me and had his air tank with him, his power tank. And we changed 3 tires and put them all back on the beads in like an hour. And also trying to do this with jacks in the snow and everything else. It was not fun, but luckily everyone was there to help. But I learned my lesson. She's now getting a new set of wheels that is meant to air down. I never noticed it before because
No, we
when
were just chained the
when
whole
I'm
time at
off
Rom.
roading here, I don't air down to 12. Like I'll air down to like 18, 16, or 18. I Airing down to 12 was a mistake, but we had some amazing times, and it's been an awesome family vehicle, and our kids love it, and it's one of those
I'll never
things.
sell it. I
It's a
always
forever
love it.
rover
All the
because
memories in it. I
yeah,
mean,
when you and I are gone, hopefully our children will still have the memories of it.
well, it won't be long before I can teach you how to drive stick in this bottom
I know it's
field by
terrifying.
our river.
It's
That's gonna be.
terrifying
I'll teach
that
as soon as he can reach the pedals and stuff. I'll teach him.
I know. He was. You guys all know Hugh from the event. He's our weatherman slash guide. Oh, we actually tried to hire him last year because he did such a good job of navigating and
That's
guiding
right.
them.
Slash, and he can
Uh,
fly too.
yeah, he can also fly.
He loves flying with
This
his
is
dad
the
and his
pilgrimage
granddad.
is his jam. That is I would say that's more his event than it is mine. He loves it
He
with everything
does.
that he has. So it won't be long before he'll be 12 in January. It won't be long before he's driving. But yeah, that's our 83 110s, the blue one with the pilgrimage logo. I think we'll take that to the meet and greet. But
Yeah, absolutely. Just drive down
I
to Rawton,
I hope you've
South Rawton.
enjoyed these stories and of me being in stuff on fire and our adventures in
But I love it
Iowa.
when you call me and you say, I'm all right, but. And that's happened a couple of times. Like when the 310
Oh yeah, when
crashed.
I crashed.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I crash better than anyone I know. So good, my crashes are almost considered landings. But I considered that one a rejected takeoff. I was airborne,
Briefly.
but very briefly.
Hmm.
I was airborne within the length of the runway. Um, Again, something that happens, just one of those things.
That's right, because I was at a show. I was pregnant with Hugh when you called
Yeah,
me. I just
yeah.
didn't know I was.
She gets a lot of calls of "I'm alive and okay,"
But,
but
but,
so thank you for listening to the Class 4 podcast. We'll have some more episodes coming out. We're going to be going over some great stuff. We've got some excellent guests lined up. Some of our next guests are going to be Ned Crystal. We're going to talk about the New Hampshire, the Dork Club, the Defender Club, and how he's built that into what I think is probably the most functioning Land Rover club in the United States right now. Um, we're going to tell the story of how we got to South Royalton. And I'm not going to tell that story. We're going to bring in Jason Krantz, my lawyer, to tell that story.
Yeah, the
So
attorney's doing that
the
one.
attorney's going to do that one, so it's all done right. But I think that's a great story. I know some of you have heard it around the campfire, but it brings in some amazing. Again, one of those things where one thing went wrong and then a lot of things went right, and a lot of amazing people helped me along the way. And we're going to introduce you to those people because they're all people that come to the pilgrimage and help make it possible. From Pete to Cheryl and everything at the Hendersons, it's all in Jason, both Jason the lawyer and Jason from Worthy. All that stuff has all come together to help me to make the pilgrimage into what it is, and so that's a great story, and I look forward to telling that one in the future. All right, everybody, have a great day, and I hope you enjoy your week.
Bye, everyone, and we look forward to seeing you at Worthy in South Royalton on May 20th.